is in fact time for our top story. Now, in Nigeria, there are many conditions that get labeled as a Western problem, something that Nigerians don't deal with. And a perfect example of this is cerebral palsy. More than 700,000 Nigerians are affected by this condition, but many of us don't even know what it is. Well, I'm joined by someone that is going to shed some light on cerebral palsy for us, and we'll go into the conversation a lot deeper. And his name is Femi Gbadebo. He is the OFR as well. I have to congratulate you before I even go any further. He's the founder and CEO of the Benola Cerebral Palsy Initiative. Thank you very much for joining us.
Good morning, and thank you for having me on.
I was very excited. I began the show with saying I was excited to have you come onto the show because, honestly, so many people do not even know about this condition. I myself, when I knew, I was doing the interview, I was amazed by what I was finding, and I found myself guilty of the ignorance I'm saying other people don't have, that other people have. So I think a good place to start is, what is the condition?
It's a neurodevelopmental disability that simply refers to damage to that part of the brain that controls motor movement, and also issues of muscle control that the child and the later person has. It can result from mismanaged pregnancy, where some hormones or things go wrong. So the child in the formative stage already has that problem. It can also occur during a prolonged labor, where normally when labor starts, the normal supply of oxygen through the umbilical cord is cut off. And if there's a prolonged labor, then the child starts suffering oxygen starvation. Okay. And in a normal birth, when the umbilical cord is tied around the child's neck, usually a lot of attention is placed on saving the mother. And by the time somebody realizes what's on, then the child also has become stressed. Okay. So that's when you have people say the baby's turning blue. Then you also have situations where the child is born normal, and due to mismanagement of some childhood illnesses like diabetes, like meningitis, yellow fever, and so on, the child could suffer some brain damage. Okay. Also, maybe mismanagement by some, would I say, nanny or some.
So it's not,
adult.
I guess when we're talking about conditions, people want to know immediately, is it, how can I prevent it from happening? Some things you've mentioned, it seems that, okay, perhaps that's, you could think about how you could prevent it, but some things are out of your hands, especially when, if you're a mother in labor and the complications that arise, you might just find yourself in a situation perhaps where you have, you are going to have to raise a child that does have cerebral palsy.
Yeah, you see, technically there are things we could do, ensure that we have a good mother-child care program in the country, and encourage every pregnant woman to go for full antenatal screening. It helps to teach them how to manage the pregnancy. We live in an environment where husbands can be very hard on their wives. A woman is apparently lazy, and he's comparing her with this other athletic woman who has either been farming or something all her life. So even at 9 months, she's going to the market, and this woman is there at 3-4 months. She's just unable to do anything. Now the pressure comes on. She tries to do something. She exerts herself. There can be some kind of domestic violence. There can be even, traumatic experiences where the woman is going through, marriage issues, yes. And those things cause hormonal imbalances. So, husbands need to understand this. Women need to understand this. It's nothing like being tough. You feel funny, get checkup. Now, for the delivery, there are people who should deliver at home. People who deliver in small clinics where the expertise is not there. It's good to get to the proper place and make sure that you sound them out, find out from older, experienced people the right place to go have your baby.
Have that support.
And then when you talk about having a nanny or childhood disability, illnesses, there's nothing like it's a minor fever or stuff like that. Get the right attention, get the right treatment. And if you have a stressed delivery, if you have a child that's maybe just playing, falls, hits the head, suffers trauma to the head, go for better opinion, go for a scan, and be willing to suspect anything that's not there. So knowledge really is power.
Very powerful. Well, we're going to quickly go over to Mr. Victor, who's standing by at the News Express Centre. We have just touched on the surface of the top story, so we'll be coming back for the discussion. So let's head over to news. We are continuing with our top story. We are looking at a condition in Nigeria, well, that affects Nigerians, that is not often talked about nearly as much as it should be. Cerebral palsy, and I am joined by Femi Gbadebo, the OFR, founder and CEO of the Benola Cerebral Palsy Initiative. Now, before News Express, we had discussed what cerebral palsy is. I would love to go into the Benola, what the Benola Cerebral Palsy Initiative actually is, because it's so great, because as I said, cerebral palsy is not spoken about, hardly. If you do a Google search on cerebral palsy in Nigeria, we see your initiative and not much else. We see the news articles when people are writing stories in Nigeria, they're quoting you. So how lucky we are to have you on set to talk about it. So please do tell us about your initiative.
Well, Benola is a very interesting, novel idea that came by, because my wife and I are fortunate to be parents of a 19-year-old who was born with cerebral palsy. Our son Olaoluwa, born 1996, was born and detected not immediately, but he had some developmental delays.
Okay.
Had to stay in an incubator for over 2 weeks, couldn't breastfeed normally, and he was just generally slow. Doctors kept testing, parents, older people. Yeah, we had a few, we had 2 other older kids, but even at that, you live in denial. Doctors also wouldn't say exactly what the issues are, because you see, sometimes children like that will pick up. But at the end of the day, slow to get there.
Okay.
But eventually, at 6 months, we were fortunate that an in-law of mine who's a doctor, and who is married to a neurologist, Dr. Cerebral, who's a very popular doctor in Lagos. Came to visit. They happen to have a son who has Down syndrome, so they've also been through the line. And she just took one look at Lalu and said, "This boy has a problem."
So the doctors in your hospital weren't able to detect this?
Well, you see, what I've come to discover over the years is that the average doctor doesn't understand neurodevelopmental disabilities. And because they were not trained, that's why they're called GPs. And even the pediatricians who go to study pediatrics only specialize in childhood medicine, not disabilities per se. So it's only those few doctors who have specialized in neurodevelopmental disabilities that can right away identify and know what test to bring about. Most parents would go to a doctor with symptoms. My child's neck is not steady, my child is drooling, my child at 2, 3, 4, 5 cannot sit. And what the doctor will do is to begin to find out why. As against, just going ahead and say, no, this may be a neurodevelopmental issue.
Yeah.
Let's send him to a pediatrician. If we do that, the pediatrician would now, knowing what is right, send him to like a neurologist who would now do the brain test. You see, once you identify a breakage in the brain as well, all childhood disabilities, especially they all start from the child not being normal. It takes tests and time to understand exactly where it is. And there are a whole bunch of options. That's why you have autism, you have Down syndrome, you have all those things, that all kinds of exotic names.
So you were hit with this news when your child was 6 months old?
6 months old. And of course, you go through denial. The gentleman said something. He said, "Don't go running around from place to place, because nothing can be done." Now that's what a parent hates to hear, that you mean nothing can be done. And
I mean, that's false, isn't it?
No, that's the truth. But
there's nothing that, what I mean by
there's no
nothing,
cure.
there's no cure, but
there's management.
Yes.
Okay, and so I'd say the honest truth, we did run around. I was in the Air Force. The Air Force came to us. Actually, went to Germany, went to India, went to a few places, and everywhere you got the confirmation that what this Nigerian doctor said way back said the same. And then the issue now is how do we move on? The issue of management. Unfortunately, here in Nigeria, the options are still not there. Knowledge is very low. So
up until now, even though we've mentioned how many people in Nigeria, I know the focus, as we were talking off air, seems to often be on children, but this is a condition that affects people.
People. Yes. You see, everybody talks about children with cerebral palsy. I find myself talking about that too. But I'll tell you honestly, there are people that are 64, 65 that I know in Nigeria. The people outside Nigeria. I met a lady at the conference in the US last October who is in her late 70s.
And she has
cerebral palsy.
So it's from your, the personal experience of raising your son that the Benola Cerebral Palsy initiative came about.
After managing him for 16 years, my wife did everything for 12 years because, to be honest, she did everything. Wow. I was always on the road.
Okay.
But when I retired, one thing led to another. The child had deteriorated. You see, the children would deteriorate as they grow because there will be a pool on one side or the other. There will be further deterioration, not because cerebral palsy gets worse, but because the deteriorating other associated effects, their inability to move their muscles would result in stiffness. Their inability to control maybe a pull on one side of the body, it's like a form of stroke, would result in body distortions that if they don't have the right medication for muscle relaxants, seizure control medication, and so on, by the time some of them are 5, 6 years old, they don't look so good.
And what access here in Nigeria do people have to these medications?
Well, really no manufacturing firm for now is producing these things. And it's partly because, first of all, people don't realize that there's a market for these things, okay? But then you don't know when you don't know, there's no statistics. Okay, we had to do a lot of work to come up with that number 700,000. Okay, I'll tell you, there's no person that you really talk to in Nigeria that doesn't know somebody who knows somebody who has cerebral palsy. The only thing is that they don't know the name. We have our native names for it. And then, you see, when the children start going beyond the age of 4 or 5, they start getting big, heavy. The parents start getting old and weak. And so they're not manageable. And like I said, because some of them end up with body distortions that don't make them too attractive to look at. They dribble, they have seizures uncontrolled, and a lot of things. So they're not the kind of kids you want to show off. Not like a child with autism that's, it's just a little slow, a little bit weird, and you can take him out, dress him up, look good. Or even the Down syndrome kids now that they look a little bit different, but at least they articulate, they can do things, and you begin to appreciate what they can do. With a child with cerebral palsy, especially when it's a very bad case, even it takes the grace of God for the parents to be really comfortable with that child. So that has resulted in a situation where you don't see them in public. Again, the negative attitude in our society, when people begin to attribute stuff like that to evil forces, and where there's so much stigma. I mean, a parent that cannot afford that don't have transportation of their own would have to go by public transport to a hospital. So even if the drugs are free, if the treatment is free, children like this need physio at least 3-4 times a week. And the bus stop, you can imagine the kind of stares she'll get, the kind of comments that will come with people, and so on. Most mothers wouldn't go through that 2-3 times.
That's why I guess it's so important to have these kind of conversations, because educating people to understand the condition more will do so much. Yes. And that's why I was on your website and I was seeing even testimonies, people congratulating you on the the work that you're doing. And I know there may be people at home, perhaps parents of children that have cerebral palsy, perhaps adults themselves that have cerebral palsy that have been feeling alone. And at least if you're here in Lagos, this is someone that you should reach out to. If people want to connect to you, because unfortunately we've run out of time, but I want this conversation to continue via social media, and perhaps we can get messages across to you. How can they reach out to you?
We have a website which, as of today, is the most authoritative website on cerebral palsy, at least in this part of the world.
Yeah.
It's www.benola.org. That's BENOLA.org. And when you get to that website, all the information, telephone numbers, our office address was there. What we strive to do is to change the face of cerebral palsy through education, capacity building. So we are focused on building our own capacity and then coming out with the right ways to get this information across to people. And the major thing we've identified is that the family, the parents, are key to managing these children. And so we need to make sure that we get them counseling, we get them the right information in terms of tools to use to also educate the public and their friends and neighbors. I'll tell you, in 3 years, we have seen tremendous changes in the way Nigerians are beginning to respond. Parents are beginning to come out. Parents send us pictures of their children, and we can only thank. And then medical experts and people in special education have come on board to join Benola in fashioning out strategies. Particularly, we're working on a curriculum that we can hopefully get colleges of medicine, schools of nursing, and all kinds of healthcare professionals to build into their training, so that doctors, nurses, and all people will graduate with the basic knowledge of neurodevelopmental disabilities and early intervention.
Okay. Well, thank you very much for joining us. We will be tweeting the details if you weren't able to catch the whole conversation, you can get more informed about cerebral palsy, and we'll have the video up on Facebook later as well. We're going to go on a quick break, but we have lots more when we come back.
So, did you like what you just saw? I know you did. It's very simple. If you want to see more, just subscribe to our channel right now.